It's funny, looking back. The moment my entire life shifted, the very bedrock of my existence splintering into a million pieces, wasn't some dramatic, public meltdown. It was just a single, quiet word, spoken into a tense, silent room. Fine. That was it. One word, and everything changed. My parents, Robert and Eleanor Davies, thought they had me cornered. They thought they had my future in their hands, ready to yank it away unless I played their game. What they didn't know is that I'd been playing a much longer, far more elaborate game of my own. To understand that night, that Christmas Eve when the snow fell outside while a different kind of storm raged inside, we have to go back. Way back. 18 years, actually. Because this story wasn't a sudden explosion, it was a slow, simmering burn, a meticulous calculation stretching across my entire childhood in suburban Illinois. I grew up in one of those families where love felt conditional. Like a performance review. You hit your metrics, you might get a nod. You missed the mark, and it was a lecture about wasted potential and bitter disappointment. That was my universe, anyway. My older sister, Chloe, well, she lived in a different one entirely. Same house, different rules. I figured that out around age 7. I remember bringing home a report card with straight A's, every single one, except for an A- in gym. My mother, Eleanor, barely glanced up from her phone. She just asked why I hadn't tried harder. 2 weeks later, Chloe came home with B's and C's, and they celebrated. They took her out for ice cream, to reward her improvement. I sat alone at the kitchen table, doing my homework, listening to the garage door close behind them, and understood exactly where I stood. It was a cold lesson for a 7-year-old, but I guess it's better to learn it early. My parents ran a successful accounting firm. Robert and Eleanor Davies, a name synonymous with meticulous records and polished appearances. They lived and breathed what other people thought. You know the type, the Christmas card family, all matching sweaters and practice smiles, selling a narrative of 2 accomplished children destined for greatness. The reality behind closed doors was not that. My father, Robert, built his identity around professional success and social standing. He sat on the country club board, donated to all the right charities, worked every room like he was calculating the transactional value of each handshake. My mother, Eleanor, was his perfect complement. She hosted dinner parties with magazine-worthy table settings, volunteered at the organizations that mattered, befriended women whose husbands could benefit my dad's business. Together, they constructed this elaborate facade of family perfection. And maintaining it required total cooperation from their children. Chloe understood this game instinctively. She charmed my dad's clients, complemented my mom's hosting skills with what seemed like genuine enthusiasm, and presented exactly the image of an accomplished young woman they wanted to project. Her actual behavior, what she did when no one was looking, mattered so little compared to her public performance. I watched from the sidelines, taking mental notes on survival in a household where favoritism operated as openly as the central heating system. There were moments, many moments, when the unfairness felt absolutely crushing. I wanted to scream, to demand an explanation. Why were Chloe's failures treated as charming quirks, while my minor imperfections became evidence of deep character flaws? But around 14, I made a decision that probably saved my sanity. I stopped expecting fairness. I started expecting patterns. Once I recognized the predictable, unjust rules of our family dynamics, I could navigate them. Emotion gave way to strategy. Hurt transformed into careful observation. My bedroom became my sanctuary. Maps of distant places covered the walls. Books about people who overcame impossible odds filled my shelves. I spent hours researching universities far enough from Illinois that casual parental drop-ins would be impractical. Every essay I wrote, every extracurricular I joined, every test I aced, all of it was another brick in the wall I was building between my present circumstances and my future freedom. By junior year, I had built an entire identity around being Chloe's opposite. Where she was social, I was studious. Where she was reckless, I was calculated. My walls displayed academic trophies. Hers were plastered with concert tickets and party Polaroids. My parents saw Chloe as vibrant, full of life. They saw me as dependable, which loosely translated to invisible. Then, the summer before my senior year, I discovered something that would become my insurance policy. Chloe had been dating Ethan Harrington, the son of my father's biggest client, Gregory Harrington. Ethan drove a luxury car, wore watches that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and treated my sister like a decorative accessory. Their relationship was the pride of my parents' social ambitions. They practically glowed when Ethan came over. Dad would talk investments. Mom would fuss over appetizers like royalty had arrived. The possibility of their daughter marrying into the Harrington family represented everything they'd worked for. A permanent elevation of the Davies name into genuinely elite social circles. They were so blinded by the potential benefits that they never questioned Chloe's affection for the guy. But I noticed the inconsistencies from day one. Chloe complained about Ethan constantly when our parents weren't around. His conversation skills, his fashion choices, his insufferable habit of talking about sailing. She'd roll her eyes at his texts, cancel plans to meet other guys whose existence she carefully hid. The disconnect between her public performance as the devoted girlfriend and her private contempt was jarring, even for someone accustomed to her duplicity. What my parents didn't know was that Chloe had been systematically manipulating Ethan for money. She convinced him to fund a supposed investment opportunity that was actually her personal shopping account. Through sweet talk and strategic tears, she'd extracted nearly $40,000 from him in 8 months. I stumbled onto the evidence while borrowing her laptop when mine crashed. There were bank statements, text conversations, and the most disturbing thing of all, a detailed spreadsheet tracking her extractions like some twisted game. The spreadsheet truly horrified me. Columns tracking each withdrawal, notes about the emotional manipulation techniques she'd used. One entry read, told him my car needed repairs. Cried about feeling like a burden. Got $3,500. Another, investment opportunity pitch. Used business terminology Dad taught me. $8,000 transfer confirmed. She was treating fraud like a project management exercise, complete with running totals and projected future extractions. I sat in her room for nearly an hour, scrolling through months of calculated deception. Ethan wasn't exactly a sympathetic figure with his entitled attitude, but nobody deserved to be systematically exploited by someone pretending to love them. The sheer scale of her manipulation revealed depths of dishonesty that exceeded even my cynical expectations. My first instinct was to tell my parents, to finally present irrefutable evidence of Chloe's true character. That impulse lasted about 30 seconds. 18 years of data told me they would never accept negative information about their golden child. They would minimize, excuse, or somehow blame me for the discovery. The evidence would be dismissed. I would be punished for snooping. So, I screenshotted everything and uploaded it to a secure cloud folder. Call it paranoia. Call it preparation. Something told me those files would matter someday. Gathering evidence became almost meditative. Over the following months, whenever opportunity presented itself, her phone unlocked on the counter, her bragging calls with friends that she didn't know I could hear, I documented everything. Each new piece went into my growing digital archive, organized by date, categorized by type of misconduct. I told myself I was just being prudent, maintaining records. The reality was probably more complicated. Part of me wanted validation, proof that my perceptions of our family dynamics weren't paranoid delusions. Another part wanted insurance, protection against future scenarios where Chloe's manipulations might target me directly. And yeah, a small part of me just wanted ammunition, weapons I could deploy if circumstances ever demanded self-defense. Senior year unfolded with the predictable rhythm of college applications and family dinners, where my accomplishments were acknowledged with brief nods, while Chloe's latest drama commanded the spotlight. She had graduated by then, supposedly attending community college while living at home, though her actual schedule seemed to consist primarily of brunch dates and shopping trips funded by Ethan's ongoing generosity. My college counselor, Ms. Albright, became an unexpected ally. She recognized something in me. Maybe the exhaustion of constantly performing adequacy in a household that demanded perfection while rewarding mediocrity in my sibling. During our sessions, she encouraged me to aim high, reminding me my record positioned me for schools that had seemed impossible to my freshman self. The acceptance letters arrived like permission slips for a life I'd barely dared to imagine. Northwestern University's thick envelope felt heavy in my hands, weighted with possibility and the promise of distance. I opened it alone in my bedroom, reading the words 3 times before allowing myself to believe them. For the first time in 18 years, something I wanted had materialized through my own effort rather than parental approval or sibling manipulation. I applied to 12 universities, got into 10. Northwestern became my top choice, a prestigious program that would put physical distance between me and the Davies household dynamics. My parents agreed to fund my education with the same lukewarm enthusiasm they applied to everything involving me. It was an investment in the family reputation, not an expression of parental pride. The tuition conversation still replays in my memory with perfect clarity. My father, Robert, behind his desk, reviewing the financial aid package, calculating our family's contribution like a business acquisition, evaluating return on investment. My mother suggested a state school, something closer where they could keep an eye on me. The implication that I needed supervision while Chloe had been trusted independently was not lost on me. I pushed back gently, citing Northwestern's rankings, framing my ambitions in the language of reputation enhancement they understood. They eventually agreed, though my father made sure I knew continued funding depended on sustained academic performance and appropriate behavior. Translation: stay useful. Stay quiet. Don't embarrass us. The fall semester of my freshman year proved transformative. For the first time, I existed outside my sister's shadow. Professors knew my name for my contributions, not as Chloe's younger brother. I made friends who appreciated my dry humor and fierce loyalty. I maintained a near-perfect GPA while working part-time at the campus library. Those months tasted like freedom, like the person I was always meant to become finally had room to breathe. My roommate, David, whose family had recently moved to the Chicago area, became my first real friend outside the social ecosystem my parents had cultivated. His family actually enjoyed spending time together. Siblings supported each other. Parents expressed pride without conditions attached. Hearing his stories about holidays felt like anthropological research into an alien culture. He listened to my carefully edited stories about home with growing concern, eventually telling me my family dynamics sounded deeply unhealthy. Nobody had ever named it so directly before. The library job gave me more than pocket money. It gave me structure, competence outside academics, and a community of student workers who looked out for each other. My supervisor, Michael, taught me about financial independence in ways my accounting executive father never had. Credit building, emergency funds, the importance of maintaining resources nobody else could control. Those lessons would prove invaluable sooner than I expected. Thanksgiving break shattered the illusion that distance could protect me from family dysfunction. I returned home to discover Chloe was engaged to Ethan. My mother had already begun planning an elaborate summer wedding. The household buzzed with excitement that physically pushed me to the periphery of every conversation. The engagement ring was obscene, a diamond so large it looked theatrical. Chloe displayed it at every opportunity, angling her hand to catch the light, resting it conspicuously on surfaces where guests couldn't miss it. Ethan beamed with proprietary satisfaction. The whole performance made my stomach turn, knowing what I knew. Wedding planning consumed every conversation. My mother treated the event like her personal coronation. Venue scouting, catering, tastings. Dress shopping dominated every discussion. My father talked about the guest list in terms of networking opportunities, calculating which clients and contacts deserved invitations to what he clearly viewed as a professional showcase. Nobody asked about my semester, my classes, my friends, my adjustment to college life. I sat through 3 days of wedding discussion, offering opinions only when directly solicited, otherwise just observing the machinery of family dysfunction operating at peak efficiency. During the holiday dinner, Chloe announced she wanted me to be in the wedding party. The request came wrapped in performative sibling affection, complete with tears and declarations about our bond. My parents beamed. I agreed because refusing would have caused the kind of scene that would follow me back to campus in the form of disappointed phone calls and guilt-laden care packages. The real purpose behind the invitation revealed itself over the following weeks. Chloe started calling constantly, assigning tasks that had nothing to do with wedding planning and everything to do with maintaining her elaborate deception. She wanted me to cover for her when she missed bridal appointments to meet other guys. She expected me to help manage the narrative around her finances when Ethan's family started asking questions about the investment returns she'd promised. The calls came at all hours, interrupting study sessions and library shifts with increasingly desperate demands. She needed me to confirm her alibi for a Saturday when she told Ethan she was visiting Grandma. She wanted me to memorize details about a fabricated investment scheme for Ethan's dad at the holiday party. She needed help convincing our parents that certain credit card charges were wedding-related rather than personal shopping sprees. Each request pushed me further into complicity. Refusing felt impossible given family dynamics that had conditioned me to accommodate. This wasn't just observing her deception anymore. I was actively participating. The stress started affecting everything. My sleep, my appetite, my ability to concentrate. David noticed. He confronted me one evening in our dorm room, demanding to know what was happening with my family. Why did I shrink every time my phone rang? What burden was I carrying that was eating me alive? I told him everything. The years of favoritism, Chloe's manipulation scheme, her current demands for my complicity. Speaking the truth aloud to someone who actually believed me felt like releasing pressure from a valve that had been sealed for 18 years. I played along with Chloe's requests, but I documented everything. More screenshots joined my cloud folder, recorded phone calls where she explicitly asked me to lie, text messages outlining her schemes with shocking clarity. The folder grew thick with evidence while my patience grew dangerously thin. David helped me think through contingency plans during long, late-night conversations. He researched transfer options and financial aid alternatives while I focused on coursework. His family's stability had given him practical knowledge about navigating institutional systems that my privileged but dysfunctional upbringing never provided. Together, we mapped out scenarios and prepared for possibilities I hoped would never materialize. The Northwestern Alternative Program emerged from one of those research sessions. A modified track for students facing unexpected financial challenges. Reduced tuition, flexible scheduling, same degree. I applied quietly, telling no one. It was insurance, not a plan. The acceptance arrived in early December. Another secret filed away for potential future use. Christmas Eve arrived with the manufactured cheer my mother excelled at creating. The house smelled like cinnamon and pine. Lights twinkled. Appetizers awaited guests for our annual holiday party. I'd been home 3 days, counting the hours until I could escape back to campus, back to the life I was building without them. The party represented everything my parents valued. Appearance over substance, performance over authenticity, social positioning over genuine connection. Guests arrived in expensive cars, wearing designer labels, carrying hostess gifts that screamed wealth. My mother circulated with practiced grace. My father worked the room with professional intensity. Chloe displayed her ring to anyone who showed interest. I stationed myself near the refreshments, nursing sparkling cider, making small talk with relatives I barely recognized. My cousin, Daniel, found me there. He commented that I seemed more confident, more settled. The observation touched something tender, a reminder that personal growth was visible to people who cared enough to notice. Ethan's family arrived fashionably late, making an entrance that drew the entire room's attention. His mother, Catherine, wore a statement necklace that probably cost more than my semester's textbooks. His father, Gregory, radiated that particular smugness of inherited wealth, immediately engaging my dad in conversation about market trends. Ethan gravitated toward Chloe with the proprietary air of someone showing off a recent acquisition. Then the trouble started. It began innocently enough. Catherine Harrington cornered me near the punch bowl. She started asking pointed questions about Chloe. She'd noticed inconsistencies in the investment story, unexplained purchases on credit card statements Ethan thought were private, a pattern of behavior that didn't align with the sweet girl her son had presented. Her questions were surgical, precise, the inquiries of someone who'd built a successful career detecting financial irregularities. She mentioned she'd worked in forensic accounting before retiring. That detail sent ice through my veins. This woman possessed the skills to unravel Chloe's schemes independently. She wasn't asking me for information. She was testing whether I would confirm suspicions she'd already formed. The moment stretched as I calculated my options. Deflecting might work short-term, but could raise more suspicions. Lying directly felt impossible under Catherine's penetrating gaze. Telling the truth would detonate a bomb that would reshape my family dynamics permanently. A year and a half of accumulated frustration, 18 years of suppressed resentment, months of being forced into complicity. All of it pressed against my teeth, demanding release. I should have deflected. Every survival instinct I developed screamed at me to smile, redirect, protect the family narrative at all costs. Instead, something in me just broke. I told Catherine her instincts were correct. I didn't provide specifics, didn't offer evidence, just a confirmation. The woman her son planned to marry was not who she appeared to be. Then I excused myself and walked away, heart pounding with the terrifying thrill of honesty. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. Catherine pulled Ethan aside. Ethan confronted Chloe. Chloe dissolved into theatrical tears and pointed her manicured finger directly at me. Within an hour, the Christmas Eve party had cleared out. I stood in my father's study facing a tribunal of parental fury. My mother's face was blotchy red, a physical manifestation of the embarrassment she considered worse than any actual wrongdoing. My father stood behind his desk like a judge preparing to deliver a sentence he'd already decided. Chloe occupied the leather armchair usually reserved for important clients, dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue she didn't need. The accusations came fast and sharp. I was jealous of my sister's happiness. I was sabotaging her future because I couldn't stand to see her succeed. I had always been difficult, always resentful, always looking to tear down the family rather than build it up. My father declared I had embarrassed him in front of his most important client, potentially damaging a business relationship that had taken years to cultivate. I tried to defend myself, explained Chloe's actual behavior, the money she'd stolen, the lies, the evidence I'd gathered. My words bounced off walls of parental denial like they were made of concrete. Chloe cried harder. My mother accused me of fabricating stories to deflect from my own cruelty. The patterns held. They always held. The verdict came just before midnight. My father announced my tuition payments would be suspended immediately until I provided a full, sincere apology to Chloe, to Ethan, and to both sets of parents for my appalling behavior. Furthermore, I would spend the remainder of winter break writing letters of apology to everyone who had witnessed my disgraceful accusations at the party. Only after completing these requirements to their satisfaction would they consider continuing to fund my education. The threat landed with the impact he intended. A financial guillotine suspended above my future. Without their tuition payments, I'd have to withdraw from Northwestern, abandon the life I was building, return to this household in defeat. My father's expression suggested he believed he had checkmated me. That no 18-year-old could possibly have prepared for this contingency. Chloe watched from her chair with barely concealed triumph. She had played the victim perfectly, crying on cue, denying everything with practiced conviction, redirecting parental anger toward me with the skill of a lifelong manipulator. This was her arena, the family dynamic she had mastered while I was still learning to walk. She expected me to crumble, to apologize, to resume my assigned role as the lesser child, grateful for whatever scraps of approval might fall my way. My mother stood slightly behind my father, her expression harder to read. Something in her eyes suggested discomfort with the harshness of his ultimatum. a flicker of maternal concern that she quickly suppressed in favor of presenting a united front. She had spent over 2 decades supporting my father's decisions. And breaking that pattern now would cost her more than supporting her younger son ever could. They expected tears. They anticipated bargaining, pleading. The desperate scrambling of a dependent child, faced with the loss of everything he'd worked toward. What they got instead was a single word delivered with complete calm. Fine. I turned and walked out of the study, up the stairs, into my childhood bedroom. Behind me, I could hear my mother asking my father if they'd been too harsh, if perhaps they should reconsider. My father's response was confident and dismissive. He'll come around by morning. He has no other choice. What my father didn't know was that I had been preparing for this exact scenario since the moment I discovered my sister's secrets. Not consciously planning perhaps, but building the infrastructure of independence piece by piece for 18 months. A savings account funded by my library job and summer earnings held enough to cover 1 semester's tuition at a less expensive program. More importantly, I had researched transfer options extensively during the fall semester, identifying Northwestern's lesser-known alternative program that offered reduced tuition for students willing to complete their degrees through a combination of online and in-person coursework. The preparation had been David's idea initially, framed as responsible financial planning rather than escape preparation. He helped me open the savings account at a bank my parents had no connection to, routing deposits through a system they couldn't monitor or freeze. We calculated exactly how much I would need for various scenarios, from simple tuition gaps to complete financial independence. The spreadsheet we created felt like a lifeline during the months of increasing pressure from Chloe's demands. My acceptance to the modified program had been sitting in my email for 3 weeks, a backup plan I hoped I'd never need to activate. That night, I submitted my confirmation and paid the deposit with my own money. Then I began packing with the methodical efficiency of someone who had mentally rehearsed this escape dozens of times. The process of dismantling my childhood bedroom took approximately 4 hours. I worked quietly, systematically, removing everything that mattered while leaving behind the generic furniture and decorations my mother had selected. Clothes went into suitcases I'd stored in the back of my closet. Books sorted into boxes I'd hidden in the garage 2 days earlier, anticipating this possibility. My laptop, the device containing access to years of carefully gathered evidence, was secured in my carry-on bag where it would never leave my sight. By 6 a.m., my room had been stripped of everything that defined me as a person, clothes folded into suitcases, books boxed and labeled for shipping. The laptop wiped clean of any family photos I might have been tempted to keep. I had already arranged for a rideshare to take me to the train station, where a ticket to Chicago would carry me toward a future that no longer depended on Davy's approval. David had offered his family's guest room in Evanston until student housing opened. A generosity that still moves me when I consider how little he owed me beyond friendship. His parents, who had relocated to the Chicago suburbs just 2 years prior, welcomed the arrangement without hesitation, apparently accustomed to their son collecting strays who needed temporary shelter from difficult circumstances. The knowledge that a warm bed waited in Evanston provided comfort during those dark early morning hours when doubt threatened to overwhelm determination. The confrontation came earlier than expected. I was carrying the last box downstairs when I encountered my entire family gathered in the living room, still in their pajamas, clearly awakened by the sounds of my departure. The scene would have been almost comical under different circumstances. My father stood with his arms crossed, wearing plaid pajama pants and a Northwestern Dad t-shirt he'd purchased during move-in weekend. My mother clutched her robe closed at the throat, hair mussed from sleep, makeup absent. For the first time, I could remember seeing her in front of other people. Chloe had positioned herself on the couch, already crying preemptively, tissue in hand. My mother spoke first, her voice carrying the brittle quality of someone struggling to maintain composure. She demanded to know what I thought I was doing, where I possibly imagined I could go, whether I had completely lost my mind overnight. I sat down the box and explained calmly that I was leaving. My transfer had been approved. My first semester was already paid. I had a place to stay with a friend from campus until student housing opened in January. Everything was arranged and I would be gone within the hour. The words landed like physical blows, each sentence visibly impacting my parents' understanding of their position. My father's negotiating leverage had evaporated. His ultimatum, delivered with such confidence mere hours earlier, had been rendered meaningless by preparation he never imagined his overlooked younger son capable of executing. I watched understanding dawn across their faces. The realization that I had been planning for this possibility while they assumed I had no options. My father's business mind was already calculating the implication, the loss of control, the narrative complications, the social embarrassment of having a son publicly reject family support. My mother seemed caught between concern and confusion, unable to reconcile the obedient child she thought she knew with the independent man standing before her. The color drained from my father's face as the full scope of my words registered. He had positioned the tuition threat as a negotiating tool, never genuinely believing I had alternatives. The realization that his leverage had evaporated visibly rattled him. Chloe had been watching me with growing unease, her eyes tracking the boxes, processing the scope of my preparations. When she finally spoke, her voice came out small and strained. "Please tell me you didn't send it." The room went silent. My mother looked between her children, confusion creasing her forehead. My father's calculated expression shifted into something approaching genuine fear. "Send what?" he asked. I let the question hang in the air for a moment, savoring the reversal of power dynamics that had governed my entire life. Then I explained. I had emailed Ethan directly. Attached was every piece of evidence I had gathered over the past 18 months. The bank statements, the text conversations, the spreadsheet tracking stolen money, the recorded phone calls where Chloe explicitly detailed her manipulation strategy. The email, I told them, had been scheduled to send automatically at midnight unless I manually cancelled it. Given that I had been occupied with family accusations and packing, cancellation had slipped my mind entirely. By now, Ethan had certainly reviewed the contents. And given the Harrington family's tendency toward early rising, I suspected they had seen everything as well. This detail wasn't entirely accurate. I had actually sent the email manually at approximately 2 a.m., after confirming my transfer and packing the first round of boxes. But the scheduled send story provided better dramatic framing and plausible deniability about my intent. In truth, I had made a deliberate choice to expose Chloe's schemes, knowing full well what consequences would follow. The evidence package had taken hours to compile properly. I organized documents chronologically, added explanatory notes for context, and included a cover letter expressing regret that Ethan had been deceived by someone he trusted. The presentation was professional, thorough, and devastating. No reasonable person could review those materials and conclude anything other than systematic fraud. My mother made a sound that fell somewhere between a gasp and a moan. My father grabbed his phone and began frantically dialing, presumably attempting damage control with Ethan's family. Chloe simply stared at me, her face cycling through shock, fury, and something that might have been grudging recognition. The phone call connected briefly before Gregory Harrington's voice, tight with controlled rage, delivered a succinct message. The engagement was terminated. Their family attorneys would be in contact regarding repayment of misappropriated funds. The business relationship between Harrington Industries and Davies Accounting was under immediate review. The call ended with a decisive click that seemed to echo through the silent living room. My father's face had gone gray. The implications of Gregory's words registered with devastating clarity. Harrington Industries represented approximately 30% of his firm's annual revenue. Losing that account would require layoffs, restructuring, potentially even closure. His golden daughter's schemes hadn't just embarrassed the family. They had threatened his entire professional legacy. I picked up my final box and walked toward the front door. My ride share was 2 minutes away. The train departed in 45 minutes. Northwestern awaited along with a life built on my own terms rather than conditional family approval. My father's voice stopped me at the threshold. He demanded that I stay, that we discuss this rationally, that I understand the consequences of what I had done. His tone had shifted from authoritative to almost pleading, a transition I had never witnessed in 18 years of living under his roof. I turned back one final time. I told him that consequences were exactly what I understood. Chloe had taken $40,000 from a man who trusted her. She had used me as a prop in her deceptions for months. When I tried to tell the truth, I was threatened with financial ruin while she was cradled in parental protection. The consequences I had triggered were simply the ones that should have occurred from the beginning. The car arrived as I finished speaking. I loaded my boxes into the trunk, slid into the back seat, and directed the driver toward the station. Through the rear window, I watched my family standing on the front porch in their pajamas, still processing the implosion of the carefully constructed reality they had maintained for so long. The weeks that followed brought scattered updates from mutual acquaintances and distant relatives who couldn't resist sharing gossip. Ethan had broken off the engagement immediately. His family demanded full repayment. My father's business relationship with Gregory Harrington collapsed entirely. Chloe had moved back home in disgrace, her social circle evaporating as word spread about her behavior. My cousin, Daniel, became an unexpected source of detailed information during those weeks. He texted regularly with updates about the family fallout, taking vicarious satisfaction in watching dynamics he'd observed from the periphery finally implode. Through him, I learned my parents had attempted to spin the narrative as a misunderstanding. A family dispute blown out of proportion by an ungrateful younger son. The Harrington family's attorneys quickly disabused them of any hope that narrative would succeed. When Chloe's former friends began distancing themselves as details leaked through the suburban gossip network, several reached out to me directly. They admitted they'd suspected her of various deceptions over the years and expressed relief that someone had finally held her accountable. The messages were validating, but also sad confirmation that her manipulative patterns had been visible to observant outsiders. While my parents remained willfully blind. My parents attempted contact several times during January. Phone calls went to voicemail. Emails remained unread. A letter arrived at my campus address, which I returned unopened. I had no interest in reconciliation on terms that would require me to apologize for telling the truth. By February, I had established a new rhythm. Classes demanded my focus. Friends provided genuine support. The modified program actually suited my learning style better than the traditional track, allowing me to work more hours while still progressing toward my degree. Financial independence tasted like cheap coffee and ramen noodles, but also like dignity and self-respect. David's family hosted me for 3 weeks in Evanston before housing opened, treating me with warmth that felt almost overwhelming. His mother made enormous breakfasts and asked genuine questions about my classes and interests. His father offered advice about financial planning with none of the transactional undertones that characterized my own father's guidance. Watching their family interact provided a template for what healthy dynamics could look like. Information I filed away for future reference. Returning to campus felt like coming home in a way my parents' house never had. My tiny dorm room became a sanctuary where I could finally exhale. The first night back, I sat on my bed and processed everything for nearly an hour. The weight I'd been carrying for years finally starting to lift. My uncle, Stephen, my father's brother, who had always existed somewhat outside the family dynamics, reached out in early March. He'd heard the entire story from multiple perspectives and wanted me to know he supported my decision. More practically, he offered to co-sign a private student loan that would ease my financial pressure without strings attached to parental expectations. I accepted gratefully. Spring semester ended with honors. Summer brought an internship at a small consulting firm where my work ethic and analytical skills earned genuine praise rather than grudging acknowledgement. I rented a tiny studio apartment in a neighborhood that required 3 locks on the door but allowed me to walk to work without relying on anyone else's generosity. The consulting internship opened doors I hadn't known existed. My supervisor, a guy named Mark, who had built his career despite his own family complications, recognized something familiar in my determination. He became a mentor in ways that extended far beyond professional development, teaching me how to navigate corporate dynamics, how to advocate for myself effectively, how to build a reputation based on competence rather than connection. By the end of summer, he had offered me a part-time position during the school year that would cover most of my remaining expenses. My apartment, despite its size limitations and questionable neighborhood, represented freedom in physical form. I decorated with thrift store finds and plants that somehow survived my irregular watering schedule. David visited during a weekend trip from campus, pronouncing the space tiny but perfect, and helping me assemble a bookshelf that had defeated my solo efforts. The satisfaction of paying rent with money I had earned myself never grew old. The first anniversary of my Christmas Eve departure came and went. I celebrated by signing a lease on a slightly better apartment, one that only needed 2 locks instead of 3. Around month 8, Chloe sent me a message, a long paragraph about personal growth and sibling bonds, and hoping we could reconnect. I sent back 2 sentences, wished her well, said I wasn't interested. She never replied, saved me the trouble of blocking her. My parents stayed silent until graduation day. They didn't show up, but a card arrived with a $10,000 check and a note about being proud. I deposited the money, sent a 2-line thank you, and got back to packing for my new job in Seattle. The consulting firm had offered me a full-time position. Mark had gone to bat for me with the partners, and they created a junior analyst role that started 3 weeks after I walked across that stage. I shook hands with administrators who had no idea about my family situation, collected my diploma, and caught a flight the next morning. The rail update came about 2 years later. I was at my desk when Daniel texted me a link to a local Illinois news article. My father's accounting firm had been hit with a lawsuit. Turned out the Harrington situation had just been the first domino. After losing their biggest client, Dad had gotten desperate. Started cutting corners, fudging numbers for other clients to keep them happy. One of those clients got audited by the IRS, and the whole thing unraveled fast. The article mentioned potential criminal charges, license revocation, the works. I read it twice, then closed the browser and went back to my spreadsheet. Not my circus anymore. Daniel kept me updated over the following months. Dad avoided prison, but lost his CPA license permanently. The firm dissolved. My parents had to sell the house, the big one with the 3-car garage and the professionally landscaped yard that had hosted all those Christmas parties. They moved into a condo. My mother started working part-time at a retail store. My father, the man who had lectured me about ROI and professional reputation my entire childhood, was now doing freelance bookkeeping for small businesses who didn't know his history. Chloe, meanwhile, had been forced to get an actual job when the family money dried up. She worked at a real estate office doing admin work. No more brunch dates. No more shopping sprees. Daniel said she gained weight and stopped posting on social media entirely. The Harrington family got their $40,000 back, plus interest. Their attorneys had made sure of that before the firm collapsed. I ran into Ethan Harrington exactly once about 3 years after everything went down. Conference in Chicago. I was there representing my firm. He was there with his father's company. He recognized me across the hotel lobby. Walked over. I braced for awkwardness. Instead, he shook my hand and thanked me. Said that email had been the wake-up call he needed. He'd been so blinded by Chloe's act that he never saw the patterns. After the breakup, he'd done some serious self-reflection about why he'd been such an easy target. He was engaged now to a woman he'd met through work, someone his mother actually approved of, he said with a slight smile. I told him I was glad things worked out. We exchanged business cards and went our separate ways. I doubt we'll ever use them, but the interaction felt like a final closing of that chapter. The last time I saw my family was at my grandmother's funeral 3 years ago now. I flew in for the service, kept to myself, sat in the back row. My parents were up front with Chloe. They looked older, smaller. My father had developed a stoop I didn't remember. After the burial, Chloe caught me in the parking lot, asked if we could talk. I gave her 5 minutes. She told me losing everything had forced her to actually look at herself. She had a steady job now. Small apartment, rescue dog. Nothing fancy, but it was hers. She wasn't asking for money or favors. She just wanted me to know she understood now why I did what I did. I told her I appreciated her saying that. Then I got in my rental car and drove to the airport. She texted me on my birthday that year. I sent back a thumbs up emoji. That's about the extent of our relationship now, and I'm fine with that. My parents send Christmas cards. I send them back. We've had exactly 2 phone calls in 5 years. Both under 3 minutes, both painfully awkward. They've never apologized. I've never asked them to. In the end, I got everything I ever wanted, a life built on my own terms, free from their conditional approval and toxic dynamics. But sometimes, when I'm alone, I wonder, was there another way?